demo was done, he's like, I gotta go really make bread for all the restaurants because he's with the One-Off Hospitality Group, and they got a lot of great restaurants, Publican Quality Meats, The Publican, Nico. So he's a busy guy. I think he just came just because it was the first one of the day. And
But yeah, it really shows like when you make stuff from scratch. He does a lot of sourdough breads. That, I mean, it's so much better. You just can't buy a Wonder Bread or after having his. And it is something, you know, if you catch his demo or maybe you can catch the video, something that you could replicate at home, you know, with a stand mixer, maybe not have to do quite so much work.
Well, I think it's time. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you guys ready?
Bright and early. I love it. Everyone's got some energy. Well, thank you very much, folks, for joining us here at the Kitchenaid Cooking Theater, Home and Housewares Day 2. Sunday Fun Day it is. All right, to start the day off right, we have a chef and food writer based right here in Chicago. She is professionally trained at the Health Supportive Cooking at the Natural Gourmet Institute of Health and Culinary Arts in New York City. She was once named the Healthy Cook of the Year by Cooking Light magazine and a finalist to host the Chicago Cult Restaurant Review TV show, Check Please. She shares her passion for healthy living, healthy cooking, and easy recipes on her website. Please welcome Chef Alia Dalal.
Good morning. Thank you guys for coming out so early too, especially with the time change. My name is Alia Dalal. I am a Chicago-based health and wellness chef. So I have a business where basically I do what I'm doing here. I teach people in cooking classes, in their homes, via videos, how to cook easy, healthful recipes, and not necessarily a specific diet, but something that you can really customize to make it work for you. So today Kitchenaid actually invited me to come showcase some of my recipes here at the Cooking Theater, but also at their booth all day. So if you're walking around the show, especially if you're in the Lakeside East building, feel free to catch up with us there. We're going to be doing all different kinds of demos, and I'm going to be demoing some different things throughout the day. And so for this demo, I thought I would bring in two of my favorite Kitchenaid appliances, and two appliances that if you look at recipes on my website, you'll see I don't have, you know, tons of ingredients or usually tons of equipment, but often you'll find the food processor and the blender. So I'll kind of go through those. If you guys, we have a nice kind of small group too, so if at the end you have questions, feel free to ask them, or I'll kind of step off to the side at the end too, and you guys can feel free to ask your questions too. But the food processor that I'm using today is new. This is a 7-cup food processor pro from Kitchenaid. So you can see it's actually like a really nice size. It's not, you know, teeny tiny that you can only do a couple things. But if you have a small apartment or a smaller kitchen, not a lot of storage space, you can see that this doesn't take up too much counter space. And it's really light too. I feel like one of the reasons Kitchenaid maybe asked me to come is they saw my skinny little arms. And they're like, well, if she can lift it, everyone else will feel like they can lift it too. So I'm gonna get started making this recipe. I'm making these sweet potato cakes. You can kind of think of them as fritters or latkes, if you guys have had those. Like I mentioned, my background is Indian, so these were kind of inspired by pakoras as well. And so I'm gonna take some sweet potatoes and shred them up using the shredder blade in the food processor. So one of the cool things I want to show you about this before I get started is you can see how really easily everything is stored in here. And another thing you'll notice is that the top just sits right on the base like this. It clicks into place. You're not like clicking things together like a Rubik's Cube and turning it on and being like, oh, I forgot that one piece. It's just really easy that it kind of comes up and down. And then all of the pieces actually store inside the food processor, just right on top of each other. So when I was growing up, my mom was an ER nurse, and we had one drawer in the kitchen that the kids were warned about. It was called the sharp implement drawer. And it was like knives and food processor blades and just kind of anything sharp and dangerous that we were just told to like stay away from it. But this seems like a slightly smarter decision. So this is the S blade that you can use for chopping, onions, celery, if you're making hummus or some kind of dip, pesto, things like that. This is the blade I use, at least 50% of the time. On top of that, you have the dough hook. So if you want to make pizza dough or any kind of dough, this is a little bit softer, so it works a little bit better than the metal blade. And then it also comes with two other blades. So this is a combination shredding disc, which is what I'm going to use today for these sweet potato cakes. And then if you flip it over, you have a slicing disc. So this kind of saves you space. If you, put it one way, you have the slicing disc. You flip it over, you have the grating disc. And you can it's very easy to tell. You can look and see which way the blades are facing. And then they also just give you a bonus slicing disc. So this one's a little bit thicker. Sometimes, if I was making a stir fry, I might want some thick carrots and mushroom slice, but if I'm making soup or something, I don't want them quite as thick, so you could use the smaller one. So I'm just gonna kind of click this into place. You'll see one way has it go a little bit further down for storage, and then if you flip it the other way, it goes right to the top. And I will actually flip it this way for shredding. And then in the top, we have a little double chute. So I'm gonna use this big one so I don't have to cut my sweet potato so small. But if you put this insert in, there's this smaller chute, which you might be like, well, why would you want the smaller chute? If you have something like carrots or anything that's kind of skinny, it's nice to have it go straight up and down. If you had a skinny carrot and in the big chute, it might tilt and then your slice isn't as nice. So that's just why. But let's go ahead and get these sliced. So the recipe just has 2 sweet potatoes. You can actually use them unpeeled. We have a whole kitchen crew back there, so mine are nicely peeled for me. And you can just chop them into pretty big pieces, but just something that will fit down the chute. And the ratio for this recipe is 2 sweet potatoes to 1 cup of chickpea flour, which is my next ingredient, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And so let me get these chopped up, and then we will shred them all. And you could do this same recipe with beets, with zucchini, kind of whatever you have. It's really just a method for getting more veggies into your diet, but in a way that's really appealing. You get that crispiness, you have a nice dipping sauce. So I'm gonna turn on the food processor. I faced it this way so you guys can see it. And just drop your pieces in. But yeah, especially zucchini in the summer. I don't know if any of you guys garden or have any neighbors who garden. If you have neighbors who garden, you definitely get zucchini in the summer. But especially when you get those really big ones that aren't so flavorful, this is a great way to use a lot of them up. Although you could use the same method for shredding them for like zucchini bread, or doing carrots for carrot cake or something like that. So just shredding these guys all up. Turn it off. Oops. And then you just open it up and you can see the lid again doesn't really twist into place. You can slide it up though. I'm gonna remove the blades and kind of set them aside over here. And then I have my beautiful shreds. I think you guys can see in the mirror how nicely these turned out, and I just love those bright colors. So I'm gonna dump this in here. And then my next ingredient is chickpea flour. So if you were making these in more a traditional, maybe French, or like I mentioned the latkes, more of a Jewish technique, often you add an egg, you add flour, you add baking powder. I like to simplify recipes as much as possible. So I might try a recipe with flour and egg and be like, well, could I get away with just doing egg? And so I kind of try things that way. So instead of using those ingredients, I'm actually using 1 cup of chickpea flour. And so this is exactly what it sounds like. It's just ground up chickpeas. So it has about twice the protein of white flour. And also, I know some people are gluten-free or trying to cut down on more processed foods, trying to cut down on refined carbohydrates in particular. So this is a way to kind of get a more nutrient-rich carbohydrate. We have a lot of beta-carotene, a lot of fiber in our sweet potatoes, also fiber and other nutrients from our chickpea flour, and like I mentioned, that protein too. So you could add an egg to this if you want, but I kind of want to show you how you can see, even just with my hand, this actually kind of sticks together. And really it's because all of your veggies are going to have some water in them. They have some moisture. So you don't really need to add more liquid to create this batter. They're really just going to have it themselves. So something like zucchini is going to have a lot more moisture. So in that case, you might want to add a little bit more chickpea flour or squeeze out any extra moisture before you get started, but the sweet potatoes are really easy, so you don't have to do that. So when I'm making a recipe like this, I have my veggie, I have my binder, which is the chickpea flour, and then I want to add at least one ingredient to give me some flavor. So I picked two to show you guys here today. I have scallions, so just scallions, green onions. I actually think these are super underrated. I love the flavor of scallions. I'm just going to sprinkle some in here. I find them a lot more palatable than a raw red onion. So often in, salad recipes or, Greek salads, things like that, there's just big chunks of raw red onion, and I like the flavor, but I find when I eat it, it's like I can't taste anything else. Does anyone else feel that way? Am I alone here? Okay, yeah. So a lot of times when I see that in a recipe, I substitute for scallion or chives. So I still get that oniony flavor, but it's not quite so sharp and so pungent and overpowering. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of cilantro, and you could do this with one herb, a different herb. I just kind of wanted to show you, you could really use this technique to use up herbs that are in your house. So if you had parsley, like I mentioned, chives, even for the winter, if you had like rosemary and thyme, it's just kind of what you like, and I like that little pop of green color too. So I'm just giving this a little bit of a mince. Actually, the stems would be fine in this too. So if you used fresh parsley or cilantro for a garnish, you could stick in the stems for this recipe. And that is it. All we are going to do is fry them from here. I'm going to just turn on a skillet. The world's most powerful burner. I'll turn it down so it's more like the one you have at home. And then I'm going to fry these up using a little drizzle of avocado oil. So is anyone familiar with avocado oil? Okay, a couple of us. Feel free to use whatever kind of oil you use at home. I might not use extra virgin olive oil just because I do want these to crisp a little bit. So you're going to turn up the heat, and extra virgin olive oil has a low smoke point. So you don't want your oil to be smoking. The fats are going to break down. You're going to lose the flavor. It's not so good. But avocado oil is actually structurally very similar to olive oil. If you think about it, they're both fatty fruits. They're both really rich in fat, rich in those monounsaturated fatty acids. So they're going to kind of give you the same nutrients, whereas most high heat oils like a vegetable oil or a canola oil, those can be a little bit more pro-inflammatory. But use what you're comfortable using. Price point, the avocado oil is a little bit more similar to an olive oil, whereas obviously canola oil and vegetable oil are both really affordable choices too. So use what works for you. Maybe I'll do 2 skillets. If you have this, you won't need more than 1 skillet, but you can either do 1 skillet, 2 batches, or this is the chef in me. We like to just do as many things at once as possible. So I think I'll do it that way. So I'm going to form these little cakes. While they're crisping up, I'm going to make our really easy 2-ingredient dipping sauce using raw cashews and sriracha. So we'll get kind of a nice spicy sauce, but also get some good fat and some more monounsaturated fatty acids and some protein from those cashews too. So that creamy cashew sauce we're gonna make, it's gonna be super silky in the blender, and this could be a great substitute for like sour cream or kind of even like a mac and cheese sauce you can make with cashews. They just get really velvety. So you can see, not even really being fussy about it, but I'm just kind of forming little cakes. I like them freeform like this. I kind of like that wild look, but if you had a cookie scoop or something like that, you could form really nice, almost like falafel type of cakes. I like serving these just with the sauce. To me, this is kind of a really easy dinner for me and my husband because you do have the protein in there. If you have the cakes with the sauce, you'll have about 20 grams of protein for the meal, even without any kind of animal food in there. Like I mentioned, I work with a lot of people at my cooking classes, so a lot of my students are not necessarily vegetarian, but I hear more and more, they're either looking to eat a little less meat or trying to eat a little better quality meat. And one of the really funny things that I've discovered is that a lot of times they want vegetarian meals to make at home, not even really because of the health reasons, but just because of kind of how crazy our schedules are now. That people will be like, well, I don't want to buy like raw chicken on Sunday, and then like I don't get around to cooking until Thursday. So they're like, well, what can I make from pantry ingredients? So these are really kind of pantry ingredient friendly. And if you just have like a couple of really good tools in your kitchen, like I said, the food processor I use constantly. So I like it for making really flavorful sauces. So you can make like an oil-based sauce, like a pesto. You can make like chutneys in it, make your own hummus. Anyone here make their own hummus? Couple of head nods. And I feel like a lot of people are like, oh no, that's too much work, but it couldn't be easier, right? So just a can of chickpeas. You can also use, cook from scratch, or you could do different beans too. Olive oil, salt, lemon juice, and whatever spices you want, like garlic and cumin, and you just blend it up. And yeah, this food processor I like because it's a really nice size. It's big enough to do those sauces and stuff in, and you saw it really held a lot of this shredded veggie too, but it's not so big if you don't have the space for it. So I'm just going to form a few more of these, and I actually will be demoing this recipe later again today. So if you want, we can't do cooking, or we can't do samples in the cooking theater, but we can do them at the booth. So if you want to come by and taste it, we have a whole schedule posted. And this one went very quickly yesterday, so I think you guys will like it. Let me just make a few more of these, and then I'll move on to the sauce. Cool. And obviously at home you don't have to wear gloves. I'm just doing it because we don't have a sink up here. If you notice that we're using nonstick skillets, which are really great because these won't stick. Overall, I do like using stainless steel, or cast iron is nice, or enamel cast iron. But if you are using the nonstick, you don't really have to worry about them sticking. These won't stick too much, but I like keeping a nonstick on hand for like if I'm frying eggs or fish or something. It is nice to have one on hand. So I'm just going to kind of turn down the burner. I think one of these might be ready to flip, and I can kind of show you if I get some nice golden color. I might let these go a little bit longer while I make our sauce. So our sauce, like I said, really couldn't be easier. This is the Kitchenaid High Performance Blender. So it is a 3-horsepower motor, so very powerful. But that means that it can make these cashew sauces silky smooth. If you're making almond milk or nut butter, or even a green smoothie, if you have, want to put kale or different greens in the smoothie, you won't get those kind of little fibers. This makes them totally velvety smooth. And same for like soups and stuff. It's just really nice. You can get a really silky soup without having to add cream. So that's one way that kind of having the right tools helps you be a little bit healthier in the kitchen. A lot of our traditional culinary techniques were really invented when everything was done by hand. So if you wanted like a really silky soup, it was about half cream, because that's the only way you could really get that mouthfeel. But now you can take, cauliflower, carrot soup, butternut squash soup, just make it this super velvety puree just with the blender. So this is just 1 cup of soaked cashews. You don't have to soak them. I do that just if I had the sauce sitting for a while, if they weren't soaked, the sauce might thicken a little bit over time. And for nutrition reasons, you're able to absorb nutrients a little bit better if you soak nuts, beans, and whole grains a few hours ahead of time. But, do what works for you. But for my advanced students, for the AP students in the group, you could try soaking the cashews. I'm also going to grab a little measuring cup and my sriracha. So I'm doing 1 cup of cashews to a 1/4 cup of sriracha. But do this according to your preferences. I like things spicy. This isn't like crazy spicy, but if you really don't do heat, you could do just a little squirt of it. Or you could do like any kind of milder seasoning. You could add smoked paprika or something like that too. So I'm going to do a 1/2 cup of water, blend this guy up. You can see this lid gets a nice seal. Our base is really solid, so you don't have to babysit the blender, which is really nice too. Make sure it's turned on in the back. And I'm just flipping these guys over. I try not to compete with the blender, so I'll be quiet for a second. Color on these looks great. We'll let that go. If for some reason, I wanted to add more, if I felt like, oh, I didn't add quite enough water, you can just take this little cup out top, which actually doubles as a measuring cup. There's measurements written on here too, so that's kind of nice. I'm gonna open this up. There we go. See, skinny arms can do it. And you can see how incredibly silky smooth this sauce is. Can you guys see that in the mirror? And feel free to come up too at the end of the demo. I'll pour this. I'll do a little glamour shot of this. Super, super silky. You can make a great vegetarian queso dip too using cashews, or mac and cheese. I would say the only use that you should never use the food processor for is mashed potatoes. Has anyone tried that? This was like a lesson in culinary school. You're like, oh yeah, I'll save time. One thing you might not want to do, because it really activates the starch and it makes them kind of gluey. Not great for mashed potatoes, but if you're making like a vegetarian or vegan cheese sauce, if you think of like mac and cheese, it is kind of like a sticky, stretchy sauce. So I actually harness that power and will saute an onion and potato and put them in the food processor or the blender, and I get this really kind of sticky, coaty sauce for mac and cheese, and it's so great. So I'm just gonna plate this up for you guys. And like I said, you could kind of serve it like this for dinner, or you could have this as an appetizer. And so it's kind of a healthier party food, and pretty affordable too. Chickpea flour you can find at almost any grocery store. And it's usually in the Bob's Red Mill section. If you guys are familiar with that, it usually costs a couple dollars, or you can get it at an Indian grocery store. I'll just plate a couple of these. Turn this off. And we have a little snack. So thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed that demo.
Thank you so much, Chef. Chef Alia Dalal. And again, you can see more of Chef Alia at the Kitchenaid booth 12902 throughout the day.
Yeah, so we are in the Lakeside East building. You'll find we kind of have a little kitchen set up like this. Demos all day. If you guys want to catch up with me, I'll actually post this recipe on my website, which is just aliadalal.com. If you guys have the little pamphlet for the booth that's written on there. And I have a ton more recipes too. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you.